Introduction. On August 6, 2015, the night of the first Republican presidential primary debate, what would become one of the most extraordinary presidential campaigns in American history faced an unsurprising moment. That is, highly unusual in most of the industrialized world, but unsurprising in Republican politics. After 2 hours of debate, a Facebook user named Chase A. Norton asked one of the last questions of the evening. I want to know if any of the debaters have received a word from God on what they should do and take care of first. 3 of the candidates, Texas Senator Ted Cruz, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker, and Florida Senator Marco Rubio, jumped on what seemed like a golden opportunity to appeal to white evangelical voters. Cruz reminded the audience that God speaks to him through the Bible and told the story about his father, giving his heart to Jesus. Walker said he was redeemed from his sins by the blood of Jesus Christ and would thus seek to do his will as president. Rubio talked about God's blessing on the American people. The message to conservative evangelical voters was strong and clear. I am one of you. New York real estate tycoon and reality television star Donald Trump, whose double-digit lead in the polls had secured him a spot at the center of the stage, was not asked to answer Norton's question. But after watching the other candidates' efforts to claim the evangelical high ground, his campaign must have realized that, if he could not make a similar appeal to white evangelical voters, he would not be at center stage for very long. Trump would need to find his evangelical groove. Coincidentally, I had spent the morning of that debate rereading University of Virginia sociologist James Davison Hunter's manifesto, To Change the World, The Irony, Tragedy, and Possibility of Christianity in America, 2010. Hunter argues that evangelical Christian attempts to change the world through politics, electing the right candidates, who will then pass the right laws and approve the right justices for the Supreme Court, have largely failed. In grasping for political power, Hunter says, evangelicals have made it more difficult to spread the gospel, promote justice for the poor and oppressed, and pursue human flourishing in the places where God has called and placed them. In one of the more telling and prophetic passages of the book, he writes, the proclivity toward domination and toward the politicization of everything leads Christianity today to bizarre turns that transform much of the Christian public witness into the very opposite of the witness Christianity is supposed to offer. Christians were never meant to change this world. Instead, they are called to honor the Creator of all goodness, beauty, and truth, a manifestation of our loving obedience to God, and a fulfillment of God's command to love our neighbor. Hunter urges evangelical Christians to stop fighting the culture wars and pursue a course of faithful presence in their local communities and neighborhoods. I read Hunter's book and watched the debate, not just as a historian interested in the relationship between religion and politics, but as a participant. I have long identified with the label evangelical. I attend an evangelical church, and I am a professor at a college with deep roots in the evangelical tradition. Of course, that deceptively simple label refers to a movement with a surprisingly diverse set of subcultures, and I have plenty of disagreements with those within those subcultures. But for all of the complexity behind the word evangelical, at its heart is a simple and compelling notion: evangel, or good news. Over the course of the next several months, Donald Trump made what seemed to be awkward attempts to win over white evangelicals. At times, his efforts to connect with and understand a religious culture he knew nothing about were comical. In a speech at Liberty University, he referred to St. Paul's second epistle to the Corinthians as 2 Corinthians. Americans who study the Bible say 2 Corinthians. In an interview in Ames, Iowa, he claimed that he never asked God for forgiveness, and he referred to Holy Communion as drinking my little wine and having my little cracker. Trump's self-proclaimed knowledge of the meaning of the sacrament did not prevent him from nearly placing a few bucks in the communion plate during a worship service in Iowa. He was apt to show up at campaign rallies clutching an old family Bible. When asked what his favorite Bible verse was, he said he liked an eye for an eye, a reference to the Old Testament punishment system set forth in Exodus 21, verses 22 through 25. Trump was obviously not aware that Jesus himself, in Matthew 5, verses 38 through 39, had something to say about the Exodus passage. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other cheek also. Beyond those bumbling attempts to use evangelical language, Trump's decidedly unchristian behavior on the campaign trail seemed at first blush to reinforce the challenge he might face in wooing evangelicals. On more than one occasion, during his rants on topics ranging from Megyn Kelly's debate questions to Carly Fiorina's and Heidi Cruz's physical appearance, Trump denigrated women. He used the televised debates to belittle his political opponents with junior high nicknames, and he even bragged about the size of his genitals. He claimed that the father of one of his opponents was involved in the Kennedy assassination. He announced that another competitor had a pathological temper and was not a member of a real Christian denomination. He denigrated a war hero and former presidential candidate. After the release of a tape on which he talked about the ways he used his celebrity to sexually assault women, the 2016 GOP presidential nominee dismissed his language as mere locker room talk. Within hours, multiple women came forward to confirm that what Trump bragged about to an entertainment reporter was more than just locker room talk. It was quite real. Ironically, somewhere between the comical religious blunders and the release of the reports of sexual assault, Trump managed to convince many evangelicals that he was a Christian. It was clear evidence of his skills as a politician. Prior to his decision to run for office, very few Americans, including American evangelicals, were even aware that he was anything but a profane man, a playboy and adulterer who worshipped not at the throne of God, but at the throne of Mammon. Trump's ability to win over evangelicals is illustrated in a January 2018 CNN interview with a group of female Trump supporters in the wake of news that his lawyer had paid $130,000 to silence a porn star with whom he had had an adulterous affair. One woman said that Trump deserved forgiveness because he had accepted Christ into his heart and life and asked forgiveness of his sins. These women said nothing about Melania Trump, the woman who most likely experienced pain and embarrassment from Trump's past sins. Nothing Trump could say or do would deter his die-hard white evangelical supporters. This is still the case.